My legitimate sister secretly had an affair. Trapped in a sea of fire, I exhausted every ounce of strength to save her. Yet, fearing her illicit tryst would be exposed, she turned on me, accusing me of setting the blaze. My stepmother flew into a rage, claiming I had tried to murder my sister, vicious, unforgivable. My father, desperate to protect her, forced me to take my own life to atone. Even the adulterer I had risked my life to save, the third prince, wanted me to bow my head, confess, and die for the sake of preserving my body intact. Confess. To hell with that. Fueled by hatred, I pulled the hairpin from my hair and drove it straight into his neck, reclaiming the dog's life I'd once saved. For the crime of attempting to assassinate a prince, the Marquis household was implicated, our entire clan sentenced to extermination. When I opened my eyes again, I was back at the moment my sister was still trapped in the flames. Recalling how she and the third prince, Wei Heng, had fanned the spark of desire into an inferno, I acted with perfect timing, locking the door from the outside, leaving them to become a pair of lovers bathed in fire. Just as in my past life, Yun Fangfei ignored all warnings, shoving me aside to sneak off with the third prince to the abandoned courtyard. It was only then I realized I had been reborn, and on my grandmother's birthday no less. In my previous life, Yun Fangfei had already been betrothed by imperial decree to become the fourth prince's secondary consort. Now, carrying on with Wei Heng was like putting the family's future on a blade's edge. Father, knowing her infatuation with him, sent me and her nurse to follow quietly, to keep disaster at bay. But she lied about needing to change wet clothes, sent the nurse away, and dashed straight for the courtyard. When I tried to stop her, she slapped me twice, then threatened to ruin her own face and blame me for it if I dared interfere. I hesitated, and she strode inside without looking back. The heavy wooden door slammed shut, locking me out. Moments later, fire flared up. Her breathless moans turned into panicked screams. Fearing that if she and Wei Heng perished, Father would flay me alive and doom the household, I scaled the wall. Inside, the two had knocked over an oil lamp in their passion. Flames roared up, blocking escape. Their clothes were in disarray, their minds in chaos. I soaked my cloak and charged in, intending to pull them out one by one. But the wolves in human skin stole my cloak for themselves and fled, leaving me to burn. When the crowd arrived, they accused me of arson to cover their shame. Half my body was charred, and I lay gasping on the ground. Yun Fangfei, wrapped in my cloak, cried delicate tears, claiming I'd long been infatuated with Wei Heng but, being of low birth through my late mother, could never match him. She accused me of trying to burn her alive. Servants, on cue from the main wife, backed her with slanders, snakes in her bed, centipedes in her tea, needles sewn into her clothes, all pinned on me. Guests believed them. My stepmother declared my ruined face to be karmic retribution. Even Father, knowing the truth, feigned grief and urged me to die to preserve the Marquisite's honor. Wei Heng, the man I'd saved, crouched beside me, urging me to confess so I might have a complete corpse. Looking at my ruined face, he sneered, saying even he would have nightmares seeing me. Confess. Never. I stabbed him clean through the neck. His blood spurted as a blade pierced my chest. We both fell into our own crimson pools. The Empress, knowing her son had been entangled with Yun Fangfei, and now seeing him dead, ordered the Marquis household executed to the last. I could not fight their power, their shamelessness, or the cruelty of the Yun family. My only victory was dragging them to the grave with me. And yet, I lived again. This time, when Yun Fangfei locked the courtyard door, I smirked, touched my still swollen cheek, and quietly fastened an extra heavy lock from the outside. The chain of fate binding her and Wei Heng would not be undone. I tossed the key away and walked to the lake. They could reap what they sowed, while I seized my second chance. In my past life, at this same moment, Li Weiying, the third prince's cousin and daughter of the Minister of Revenue, had gone searching for him, eventually finding her way to the courtyard door. The moment she saw me, her eyes turned cold. So it's you who lured my cousin here. Seeing that no one was around, she shed her demure, gentle mask and struck me hard across the face. A cheap wench begets an even cheaper spawn. With this slut's face of yours, you seduce my cousin into coming to the Marquis household day after day, just like your whore of a mother, trampled underfoot by all, warming the beds of 100 men. Gripping my chin, she raised her voice in smug challenge. I'd like to see if, when I ruin this face of yours, my cousin will scold me for it. As she spoke, she pulled the sharp hairpin from her hair and pressed it toward my cheek. I lowered my gaze, saying nothing, while the dagger hidden in my sleeve slid silently into my palm. In the span of a lightning flash, I had already thought through my excuse for silencing her and where to bury the body. At the critical moment, her personal nurse hurried over. Miss, Madam is calling for you. Seeing her pressing the hairpin to my face, the nurse frowned slightly. Even if she's treated like a maid, she is still the Marquis concubine-born daughter. For the sake of your reputation, you should think twice. Li Yueying unwillingly let go, but not before tapping the hairpin lightly against my cheek in cold warning. My cousin is not someone you can covet. If I hear you've been tempting him again, drinking tea, riding horses, shooting arrows, I'll make sure you end up like that whore of a mother of yours. I'll leave your face for now, but I, Li Yueying, swear that within 3 months, I will see it destroyed. She left with her head held high, leaving me drenched in cold sweat. When you have no power to resist, beauty becomes a crime. My mother had been proof of that, and I was no different. This life, I refused to be a lamb awaiting slaughter. Knowing Li Yueying was alone by the lake searching for her beloved cousin, I naturally decided to grant the pair a reunion, in the underworld. Hidden in the shadows of the trees, I waited until she hurried past, then shoved her hard into the lake. Splash. The surroundings were silent. Aside from me concealed in the dark, no one heard the splash, the desperate cries, the frantic thrashing. I waited until she was nearly spent, her nurse almost upon the scene, before feigning gallantry and diving in to save her. Save her, yes, but teach her a lesson too. I was just a weak woman, unable to lift or carry her. Dragging the frenzied girl along the rocks at the bottom, I accidentally broke her finger, accidentally tore her back, accidentally raked a long gash down her thigh, all perfectly reasonable in such chaos. Covered in wounds, she thrashed harder from the pain. But with my grip on the back of her collar, hauling her through the water until she was nearly choking, the more she pushed at me, the more water she swallowed. When she struggled too violently, my hand slipped. Half her face smashed against a jagged rock, her body going limp, motionless. A faint wash of blood drifted toward me. I guessed her face was likely ruined, the pain enough to knock her out. She had once listened to my sister's one-sided words, shielding her own filth by framing me for seducing the third prince. Even when I begged on my knees, explained 100 ways, she never relented. Together, they had forced me to carry scalding tea until my hands blistered, to stand guard in a storm until I fell gravely ill, to eat pastries even the third prince's dogs wouldn't touch. The only maid who had been truly loyal to me was coerced by them into diving for a hairpin in the lake, and never resurfaced. When I resisted, they ran to complain to father and stepmother, who had me confined, starved, beaten until I lay bedridden for half a month. Thinking of her lofty, hateful expression, I ground my teeth. She had needed the right moment to destroy my face in our last life. But if the chance didn't exist, I would create it. I would seize this moment for revenge. Bowing my head in forbearance only led to a wretched death. If I was to be called monstrous in this life, I would wear it without shame. I held her limp body and slammed her again and again into the jagged rockery until there was no part of her left unscathed. Only then did I stop. So this was what it felt like to be utterly unrestrained, exhilarating beyond belief. The me of my past life, always yielding, always enduring, would never have dared to imagine it. In the dark, murky water, I couldn't help but smile in satisfaction. Once my anger was spent, I didn't forget the real business at hand. Dragging her battered body, I finally broke the water's surface, too breathless to move, sprawled on the lakeshore. When her nurse came running with a lantern, I weakly called out, "Save her." By the time she had shouted for help and a crowd came rushing to pull us both ashore, Li Yueying was already a blood-soaked figure from head to toe. Feigning exhaustion, I lay on the ground, my voice catching in contrived remorse. Miss Li misunderstood me. She didn't know I was trying to save her. She struggled too hard. It's my fault for being useless, wanting to save her but not having the strength. I deliberately revealed the scrapes on my arms, the bruised fingernail marks on my neck, and the bloodied knees. Luckily, Li Yueying had never been kind to me, so when they saw my injuries, everyone silently concluded she must have been ungrateful, struggling violently during the rescue until we both came to such a state. It was pitch dark, and the lake bottom was impossible to see. Hitting submerged rocks and getting covered in wounds seemed inevitable. Someone even spoke up in my defense. The second miss of the Yun family jumped in alone without regard for her own safety. Even injured, she never let go, dragging the girl to shore. There can't be another young lady in the capital with such courage. To save someone from fire and water, she's a heroine no less than any man. When Li Yueying opened her eyes, she found her body a map of wounds, half her face ruined, while the one she hated most was being praised as a heroine by noble women all around. If she then heard her beloved cousin had also met with disaster, it might be worse than death. The thought nearly made me laugh aloud. It wasn't until I saw fire rising from the abandoned courtyard that I allowed a faint smile and passed out, deeply satisfied. Surely, the hammer of fate had already fallen on Yin Fengfei. And I, who in my last life had been the scapegoat for her over and over, would not be helping this time. When I woke, the first thing I heard was that the courtyard had burned. I slipped my most valuable jade ring into the hand of the maid who had brought the news, urgently asking, "How is she?" The maid glanced down to make sure no one was near, then whispered, "The eldest miss and the third prince chased a thief into the abandoned courtyard, but the thief locked them inside. The fire burned the eldest miss badly, and the third prince as well. I fear he will never be crowned prince now. The thief was executed, but the empress is furious and may vent her anger on the Marquis household. Madame fainted at the sight of the eldest miss's injuries and hasn't woken. The Marquis is beset from all sides, his head must be about to split." Hearing that, my heart surged with joy. So many enemies, all in misery, what a delightful thing. Everyone in the capital was shrewd enough to know what a man and woman alone in an abandoned courtyard were doing. Chasing a thief. Had all the Marquis' servants died? Had all of the third prince's guards vanished? To bring no one along and lock the door from inside, anyone with half a brain knew exactly why. The noble daughters who had once been the loudest in accusing me of unclean intentions toward the third prince were suddenly enlightened. Every time I had tea, viewed flowers, or rode horses with him, Yun Fengfei had been present. And it was she who had been whispering to spread rumors of my improper feelings for him. Her carefully cultivated image of grace and propriety was torn to shreds in an instant. A woman who appeared virtuous yet secretly coupled with another, dragging her family's name into the mud, and she dreamed of being a role model for noble ladies. Only in her dreams. Father understood all this. To cover for her, he had thrown a cloak over her disheveled body as soon as she was pulled from the flames, hoping later to swap me in as the scapegoat. But before the fire had even died down, a servant came rushing in. "Master, disaster. Miss Li fell into the lake. Though second Miss Yuella saved her, she was covered in blood and remains unconscious. The Li family's carriage has already left the estate. They demand an explanation tomorrow." So much for replacing her crime with mine. That plan went up in smoke. Plenty of women by the lake had seen me soaking wet, my hands bloodied from scratches, being helped away. And under father's cloak, the girl he was cradling and begging to wake could only be Yun Fengfei. My dear sister, so pitiful now. Her reputation in ruins, her body crippled, likely to be discarded by the family like rubbish. With such deep sisterly affection between us, of course I had to rush to visit her, to see clearly how she now lived a fate worse than death. and, incidentally, to deliver the final blow. Smack. The moment I stepped into her room, father struck me hard across the face. The taste of blood filled my mouth. Before I could even raise a hand to my swollen cheek, he ground out between clenched teeth. Didn't I tell you to follow your sister step by step, never leaving her side? His precious daughter was now ruined in both face and future, and he was livid, eyes red, his whole body trembling with rage. Looking at his grief-stricken face, as if mourning a parent, I felt an almost perverse satisfaction. When my own mother had died, my pain had been 100-fold worse than his. Still, I let my eyes glisten, my voice soft and trembling, the picture of innocence. Elder sister said she had an important matter to discuss privately with the third prince and would not let me follow. She sent both her maid and nurse away on errands, leaving only me. How could I dare block her path? As I spoke, I made sure to show the red, distinct handprint still on my cheek. Of course, that slap had been delivered by my own hand while changing clothes earlier. If one wished to be ruthless toward others, one had to be just as ruthless toward oneself. The Marquis knew perfectly well the virtue of his beloved daughter. But he still lowered his gaze, eyes cold with hate as he said, "Your sister's face is destroyed, her future gone. You failed to guard her, this cannot be forgiven. Someone, bring. Calm your anger, my lord." For the first time, I raised my head and met father's eyes directly. My elder sister was now ruined in both body and reputation. Her marriage to the fourth prince would never come to pass. But I, too, was my father's daughter, and the engagement between the Marquis household and the fourth prince had never explicitly named Yun Fengfei. In that case, was I, Yun Yuela, not equally suitable? The Marquis's hand trembled as he pointed at me, voice shaking with fury. "Your sister is living a fate worse than death, and you're already rushing to seize her marriage and her future. Such a venomous heart, exactly as she once said, you are a calamity that cannot be kept." He bellowed. "Someone. Drag her out." "What? You mean to bury the entire Marquis household with her, just to prove your pity for your precious daughter?" He froze, his whole body going rigid. I pressed on at once. The third prince's accident happened inside our estate. No matter what, the Marquis household cannot escape blame. And the one locked inside the courtyard with him, carried out in disheveled clothes, was the eldest miss. How will she ever clear her name? If it were me, rather than sit and wait for His Majesty's wrath to destroy everything you've built, I'd take the initiative, sacrifice my sister to protect the entire household. You dare? I gave a cold laugh, pointing toward Yun Fengfei lying on the bed, swathed in bandages like a mummy, and sighed. In her state now, do you still imagine her future will be full of spring glory and admiration? Her name is ruined, her face destroyed. Even with the reach of heaven itself, you can't save her from being discarded by the clan. If the emperor decides to punish us, do you think she, or this household, will have any chance of survival? It was clear he had already thought of this. His fists clenched, brows furrowing deeply, his face torn with hesitation. I spoke each word with deliberate clarity, dripping poison into his ears. Better to act than to wait for the execution block. If the third prince truly intended to defile her, locking her in the courtyard and bringing disaster to her and to us, then shouldn't the Marquis household still have a chance to strike back? If you want the household to survive, you must be swift, precise, and ruthless, fight before the emperor and the entire court. Win public opinion and seize the initiative. If your words are sharp enough, even the royal family will think twice. The outcome may not be as hopeless as it seems. His pupils contracted, eyes filled with shock. But if we do this, Fengfei may not survive. I shook my head. To preserve the third prince's name, the empress will twist it into a tale of mutual affection, tragically interrupted by the fourth prince's meddling. She'll mourn them as ill-fated lovers. Fengfei will live, and not only will the household remain safe, she'll finally be married into the third prince's residence, exactly as she's always wished. For all his cunning in reading the tides, My father now stood trembling at my words, stunned as though I'd struck him. She is your sister. If we trample the third prince to save ourselves, how could she live in his household in peace? I gave a helpless shrug. If I had been the one burned, what would you have done for the household's safety? Compared to the century-long honor of the Marquisate, compared to the lives of hundreds under this roof, personal feelings mean nothing. You are the Marquis first, the head of the young clan second, and only last, the father of your daughters. Your child is merely thinking for you in your stead. He seemed to understand. Staggering back step by step, he turned away, leaving with the look of a man who had made a decision that cut to the bone. The pain of burying one's dearest with one's own hands, now my father would taste it. When my mother died, didn't he remain calm, almost indifferent? This knife had to be driven straight into his heart for him to feel the agony I once knew. The Marquisite's future outweighed all else. In my past life, he had forced me to die for it. In this life, I would make him push his most beloved daughter into hell, to live a fate worse than death. When I saw Yin Fengfei's fingers twitch on the bed, I knew she had heard. I smiled, leaned close to her ear, and whispered. You heard that, didn't you? It was father who chose the household and its future, not you. Are you happy? Heaven and earth may abandon you, but at least you'll have your lover. This is father fulfilling your wish. You've always despised the slut's face I inherited from my mother. And now. You have no face at all. Burned by fire, it hurts, doesn't it? From now on, every time your wounds are cleaned, every time you see a mirror, every time you remember how people once adored you, you'll wish for death. But since you've always been allowed to do as you please, surely you can endure it. Live long, and enjoy every moment of your remaining glory. After slicing her heart open with a soft blade, I left that half-dead wretch for the third prince to swallow whole, turning away with satisfaction. But as I rounded the corridor toward my own quarters, I came face to face with the fourth prince, Wei Shen. He held up the key to the courtyard I had thrown away, his brows lifting, eyes cold with menace, voice laced with threat. Good luck. Good swimming. And a heart as venomous as it is cunning. But what I like most is that you understand the times. Even a foolish sparrow knows the right branch to land on. Oh. Is it so satisfying to hide in the dark, playing people in the palm of your hand? Then when your venomous heart comes for my life, I hope you'll find it just as satisfying. I've already pushed your father to strike back with everything he has, grinding the third prince into the mud. Are you pleased now? My property, will you return it? Wei Shen stared at me for a long moment before a slow smile curved his lips. He stepped closer. Ignoring my attempt to retreat, his cold fingers clamped my ear and forced the earring he had once taken from me back into place. But he deliberately missed the hole each time, stabbing through the flesh of my ear again and again. You schemed against me. Seeing you bleed a little, surely that's not too much to ask. The pain was so sharp I drew in a cold breath, which only seemed to delight him, making his hand more vicious. Don't move. If I can't put it in, I'll just toss it back into the abandoned courtyard and tell my good royal brother exactly who gifted him his current misery. My hands clenched tight, lips pressed until they bled, pretending to endure his temper in silence. But when his smugness tipped into carelessness, my hand moved fast, precise, ruthless, slipping beneath his robe to seize his most vulnerable spot. I bared my teeth in a smile, eyes gleaming with cold malice. Perhaps you don't understand me. Someone who's crawled out of hell doesn't fear death. His body went rigid. I applied the barest extra pressure, and a strangled groan escaped between his teeth. Leaning in so my breath brushed the pallor of his cheek, I murmured. You wanted me to ruin the third prince, and I've already pushed my father to do it. In return, you'll have to give me shelter. Out there, the people who hate him are countless. You and I together, hardly a loss for you. If no one shields me, the only road left is death. And if I die, dragging you down with me, wouldn't that be such a waste? Fire flashed between his brows. From within his sleeve, a dagger slid into his palm. Another one who wanted my life. I tightened my grip again, and this time his pain broke into a raw, involuntary sound. If you dare draw that blade, I can crush your glittering future in an instant. Do you believe me? Pinned by my hold on his very life, he feared both the pain and the disgrace if anyone saw. His breathing turned ragged. Arms locked around my waist in an intimate guise, he bent to my ear, still bleeding, and whispered. What do you want? Return my earring and key. From now on, we're strangers. No debts, no favors. Satisfied, I curved my lips, leaned in, and bit down hard on his ear. My teeth sank until the taste of blood filled my mouth. I smiled sweetly, voice almost innocent. You still don't get it. Even if I die in the next breath, in this one, I'll have blood for blood. Wei Shen shuddered with pain, his reflex to curl away only making the agony between his legs spike, cold sweat pouring down like rain. This starving wolf had known everything about last night's events. He had picked up the key I'd thrown away and, while I was unconscious, taken my earring. His threat had been cold and clear. If the third prince doesn't die, he must be ruined, disgraced, and left wishing for death. Otherwise, the earring goes into the fire, the key into your father's study. The flames will find their outlet, I'll see to it. You understand. He wanted results before noon tomorrow. Yet even after I had pushed my father to crush the third prince, Wei Shen was unsatisfied, all because a rootless little sparrow like me dared to think of replacing the sister who had cuckolded him, to land on his lofty branch. A sparrow climbing branches, a swan in flight, so what? He refused. Seeing father approaching from afar, I asked him one last question. I may not give you the future and happiness that highborn women can, but with just a fraction of my effort, I can destroy all of yours in ways no one can ever restore. You're clever, fourth prince, which will you choose? Maybe it was my stubborn, merciless gaze behind feigned innocence, or maybe it was the quiet ruthlessness in my light tone that made people flinch. In the end, he wouldn't gamble his future against someone unafraid to die. He swallowed his rage, forcing himself to yield. Fine. I'll take you into my residence. Now let go. Let go, now. If anyone sees this, I'll make you wish for death. Still mouthing off. I gave one last squeeze, drawing a sharp cry from him before releasing and stepping back, raising my voice. Father, the fourth prince is here to see you in the study. When Wei Shen brushed past me, his look was all venom. I knew exactly what it meant. Both he and Wei Hang were ruthless, but at least Wei Hang pretended gentleness in public. Wei Shen didn't even bother to hide it. But I wasn't afraid. When he glanced back through the corridor, I lifted my brows, let my lips curl in a cold smile, and dangled the waist token I'd borrowed from him. Mouthing the words silently. We can die together. The killing intent in his eyes flared white-hot. I didn't care. Turning on my heel, I walked away with light, easy steps. Just like his earlier threat, if I tossed the token into the fire, it wouldn't matter whether he'd said it or not. The Empress would see to his eradication. He lacked my patience. Fresh from my talk with father about replacing Feng Fei's marriage with mine, he'd rushed over with an excuse to see me. But faster than his words was his cold hand, clamping around my throat. Will you hand it over, or shall I search you and kill you after? My breath caught, my face flushed, and I laughed. Low at first, then louder, unrestrained. His hand shook as he looked at me like I was mad. He couldn't help himself, his hands searched, my waist, sleeves, even across my chest. Where is it? Slowly, my fingers traced the pale, bloodless back of his hand, inch by inch. When I felt him shiver, gooseflesh rising, suspicion in his eyes, that was when I drove my knee up hard into his groin. He doubled over instantly, releasing me. You know why you'll never match Wei Hang, for all your cruelty and viciousness. Clutching himself, white-faced and speechless, he stared. Because. I let a cold smile spread, you're not as clever." He was seething, ready to explode, but I calmly poured him a cup of tea. "If I were you, holding something that keeps your opponent awake at night, I'd never rush here to give them the chance to trap me. I'd let them burn themselves out, go mad, until they couldn't even touch my sleeve." "Oh. You're afraid delay will bring trouble." I shoved the tea into his hand. "I'm not. Because I moved it the moment I got it. I can die, but the thing won't. And if the fire isn't an option, in a capital this big, do you really think there's nowhere else? In this place, people died every day. All it would take was slipping that dangerous token onto some unavenged corpse inside the third prince's residence, and the crime would fall neatly upon him. Wouldn't it?" Wei Shen understood. That waste token I'd taken from him was now a blade at his throat, ready to slice through his rank and life at any moment. His fingers whitened around the teacup. "I've already spoken with your father," he said. "We'll erase your mother's low-born record, posthumously honor her as a proper wife, and take you as a secondary consort into my residence." "But what I want," I said, "is more than that." His head snapped up, eyes dark with malice. "What else do you want?" I brushed at an imaginary speck of dust on his shoulder, my voice low. "I want to enter the palace, to stand above all, with you." Crash. The teacup shattered on the floor. His gaze burned with killing intent. "Who taught you to speak such words?" I ignored the question, settling beside him with a quiet sigh. "You and I are the same kind of people. You should have greater ambitions. Wei Heng has the central palace behind him. Even if he tramples you openly, insults you to your face, your mother can only urge you to endure, over and over. That's why he presses harder each time. The woman his family wants, and your future principal wife, do you think he wouldn't take her too? And if he wanted your life as well, how long would you endure? You already hate him enough to pour lamp oil in the abandoned courtyard, desperate to burn him alive, enough to use my father's hand to ruin his name. Then why not go further, take everything that should be yours? When you sit on the highest seat, who will dare touch you? Look at me, I've already succeeded. Be ruthless enough, desperate enough, and both my sister's marriage and you yourself are now mine." Everything I knew about Wei Shen came from the scorn Wei Heng and Yun Fengfei spat at each other in bed, calling him a wolf skulking in the dark, vicious and cunning, always ready to bite back. But, they said, Wei Shen was a crippled wolf, ambition without the courage or will to fight back. All that courage had been worn down to nothing by his useless mother. I had thought then, so he was a wolf after all. If fate let me marry him in place of my sister, I would have countless ways to tame such a solitary, feral beast, to force him to fight for me, rise for me. For instance, be more venomous than him, colder than him, madder and more merciless than him, until he had no choice but to stand on my side. I hadn't expected that in this life, I would maneuver things to this exact point. Wei Shen, rattled by my madness, beat a clumsy retreat. Watching his staggering back, I knew I'd won half the battle. Pulling his waist token from the inside of my thigh, I laughed softly with contempt. "So in the end, what are you? A mouthful of schemes, but when the prize is right before you, you can't take it, an empty shell. You still have to rely on me." In court, my father cried injustice, banging his head against the pillar, ready to die for his beloved daughter. That same day, Wei Shen knelt before the imperial study, swearing he would rather die than marry into the marquis household. My grandmother and the Empress Dowager had been bosom friends in their youth. The marriage between our houses was agreed when they were still maidens. What couldn't be fulfilled in their son's generation would be fulfilled in mine. If Wei Shen wouldn't marry my ruined sister, the only bride he could take as principal wife was me. But the laws of great sway forbade those of common status from marrying into noble ranks. My mother had been a low-born maid, tattooed as a criminal. To protect me, she took on the charge of seducing the marquis while drunk, bore me, the illegitimate spawn, then threw herself into the river, severing all ties. Even so, in the marquis household, I was a shameful existence, in name the marquis's daughter, in truth no better than a maid serving my sister. If I married at all, it would be a stroke of luck to wed a wealthy merchant. The emperor was hesitant, until a lost ancient text from Qingling surfaced, containing a poem once deemed a treasonous code. It matched exactly the veiled verse that had condemned my maternal grandfather to death for treason. Back then, he had been found hanging in prison, leaving a blood-written letter of protest. Only now, decades later, was his name cleared. My father always had the means and cunning, it was only a matter of whether he deemed it worth the effort. With a mere lift of his hand, he gave me everything I'd begged for in my past life and never received. Relieved of suspicion, the emperor, in gratitude for my rescue of a general's daughter, granted me the title of county lady and promised me as Wei Shen's principal wife. He even bestowed great favor upon my father, silencing the friends who had planned to die with him on the throne room floor. When I returned home in triumph, the once proud madam of the house, now ruined and bereft, was screaming herself hoarse. A teapot shattered at my feet, tea splattering across my skirts. Her eyes, bloodshot and wild, fixed on me as she shrieked. You climbed to your high seat over my daughter's blood and flesh. How dare you, how dare you? You grew up with me, you begged to marry me, swore before the heavens we'd be together for life. But after one southern tour, you slunk off to tryst with the tutor's daughter in Qingling, even buying a house for her. From the start, it was you who betrayed me, who spat on my feelings. And now you trample my daughter to rise in power, how do you have the face? My father had indeed thrown all his weight into this, smashing his head against the Dayan pillar, his blood soaking his robes. It had taken an hour under the physician's care to save his life. Now, barely awake, he lay silent, the tea overturned, the screen at the bed's head smashed into splinters. Shame and pain weighed 1,000-fold in his eyes. This woman, born to an old, lofty clan, had always been proud, dismissing women of humble birth, spitting the word whore at my mother, calling her shameless and without decorum. Now she raved like a madwoman, her decorum and face in shreds. I made no effort to hide my mockery, and my words pierced straight to the bone. She lunged at me, striking a blow that knocked the jade hairpin from my head, my hair falling in a wild tangle. Slut! You urged the Marquis to rob my daughter of her marriage. Why didn't you die with your whore mother? I should never have let you live. I laughed softly. Instead of blaming me for taking your daughter's future, perhaps you should blame yourself for pouring all your attention into watching your husband. Every extra word with another woman, every friendly glance, even a maid pausing half a step too long to serve tea, nothing escaped your suspicion. But tell me, did you ever teach your daughter what propriety is? What decorum means? If you hadn't indulged her, praised her as flawless, spoiled her into arrogance, would she have this ending today? In truth, you're unfit to be mistress of this house. You see only the Marquis, not the survival of the household, nor the family's future. You ruined her yourself. She swayed but lifted her head, eyes blazing. Don't think to beguile me. You and that whore are the same, seducing men's hearts. She stole the Marquis, and now you'd steal mine. I won't let you destroy me and my daughter. I'll kill you. Yanking the hairpin from her head, she lunged. But I had already seen my grandmother approaching from afar. Ignoring my father's cry of alarm, I stepped straight into the point of the hairpin. She hadn't prepared properly, and the hairpin wasn't sharpened. Taking my life was no easy matter. Breaking the skin and drawing a little blood was the best she could manage. Still, I let out a terrified cry right before grandmother, collapsing to the floor, clutching my wound as I sobbed. Grandmother, save me. Yuella is so scared. To grandmother, the rise and fall of the Marquis household mattered above all. She had gone to the Empress Dowager, thick-skinned, to beg for the marriage, all to push the household one step higher. Even if Yin Fengfei was ruined, she would never allow the marriage with the fourth prince to be lost. And now I was a county lady, and promised as the fourth prince's principal wife. To her, it was the best possible outcome. Seeing me curled on the floor, tearful eyes pleading, whether to save face or to vent her anger on my stepmother, grandmother did not hesitate to bark. The principal wife of this household has lost all virtue. Drag her to the ancestral hall, let her reflect before our forebears. Father struggled to plead, but I clutched my wound, tears streaming, and raised my voice to chime in. Grandmother is truly just and fair. If word of today's events reached His Majesty, he might think our household harbors resentment toward imperial favor. At such a sensitive time, we cannot afford even the smallest scandal caused by mother's madness. Father's lips moved, but in the end, he said nothing. Once my stepmother was confined to the ancestral hall, I wasted no time going to share the good news with my dear elder sister. She lay in bed, every breath hurting down to the bone, her life worse than death. Under the thick bandages swathing her face, there was no trace of its former beauty. She still dreamed her master-servant fantasy, hoping the third prince would finish me off. I laughed at her foolishness. You think innocence speaks for itself. You don't know, words are the deadliest blade. From now on, the whole world will know Wei Hang defiled you in the abandoned courtyard. Father had to threaten his own life to get you the title of secondary consort. If you die, it's the royal family silencing a witness. If you live, you're the eternal stain on Wei Hang's life. The empress will be torn, disgusted yet forced to take you into the prince's residence, hating you enough to skin you alive. Wei Hang, shamed by his own trap, will hate you even more and wish you a fate worse than death. Rely on him. Don't make me laugh. When you were whole, he wouldn't touch you for fear of tainting his name. Now, he won't even look your way. Father's chosen the fourth prince, Wei Shen. You think you can still kill his principal wife? I tilted my head in mock pity. Instead of daydreaming, you'd better crawl to the ancestral hall to see your mother raving herself into madness. Maybe each visit will spare you one in the future. Oh, but you've no face left, perhaps you'd better stay put. Might frighten her into thinking she's seen a ghost in broad daylight, and kill her all over again. Yun Fangfei trembled with rage, but her pain made every attempt to strike me look like a giant silkworm writhing. I remembered the time she made me and a dog kneel together to see who was more loyal. I didn't hold back. Disgusting. You're just like a maggot squirming now. If Wei Hang saw you like this, he'd vomit. I watched her break, rage powerless, wounds reopening and bleeding until she had to grit her teeth through another round of skinning and salving. Only then did I smile and leave. Wei Shen was waiting. He held out his hand, long fingers curling slightly, his voice low. What you wanted, I've given. Now, what about what I want? I shamelessly laid my hand over his, smiling. What's the rush? You already have me, do you think that thing will sprout wings and fly away? He choked on words, unable to speak. After so many lessons, the wild wolf, once biting and lunging, had grown much tamer, bearing no fangs at me now. His mother, fearing trouble, had begged the emperor to set the wedding before the Laba festival. I nodded, smiling sweetly. I'll work hard on the wedding robes, waiting for you to come marry me. He fell into complete silence. With the wedding near, the household was in a frenzy. I knew the moment was right. While the steward was out shopping, I took Wei Shen's waste token and spent a hefty sum to procure certain dangerous and rare substances. Though priceless and hard to obtain, the money came from the emperor's reward, and what I'd traded for was my own comfort and pleasure. I was more than willing. And such fine things should naturally be shared. Returning to the estate, I brought the gift straight to the ancestral hall for my esteemed stepmother. The moment she saw me, she seemed possessed, ready to smash me dead with the ancestors' memorial tablets. But I stood steady, looking down at her aging, withered figure, my smile cold. You'll never match my mother, in looks, in temperament, in talent, you're leagues beneath her. Perhaps that's why father fell for her at first sight, kept it from you in the capital, and secretly married her in Qingling, building a little home just for them. Her voice shook with fury. Yun Yuela. Lonely courtyard at dusk, crows crying in sorrow, remembering the past, the slanting moon, pear blossoms falling. I tilted my head. In my memory, that courtyard had a great pear tree. Did you ever see it? Just a few gentle words, but they stabbed deep into the weakest point in the heart of a woman born to an old, noble clan. She jabbed a finger at me, screaming. Whore! You are exactly like her, lowborn, shameless. No matter how clever your tricks, you can't escape a miserable death. A pack of coarse, filthy commoners, daring to dream of climbing over the heads of a family with 3 generations of scholar officials. To die in a brothel, rotting away from disease, serves her right. Beneath my sleeve, my hand trembled slightly, but my face remained calm as still water. I only shook my head, clicking my tongue in mockery. Don't think to use my own methods against me. The difference is, I speak the truth, and your words are lies. Lies can't even scratch my skin. The more she spoke, the more pleased she became, laughter swelling until she looked at me as if I were some ridiculous clown. Your mother killed herself to atone, throwing you at the gates of the Marquis household in broad daylight so the whole world could witness it. That way, the household couldn't deny you, and would be forced to wash away your slave blood, let you live in peace, even become a Marquis's daughter, rich for life. The humiliation I suffered because of her, I hated her so much I wanted to tear her apart and drink her blood. How could I let her die peacefully? All it took was a handful of silver to hire a few swimmers to drag her up. Less than a stick of incense later, she was alive again. I personally sold her to the cheapest brothel in Yenmen, left her to be toyed with by thugs and vagrants for a single copper coin. Didn't she like seducing men? Then let her die in a man's bed, that should have satisfied her. Her smile turned triumphant as she looked me up and down. So the world isn't wrong, you are exactly what you were born from, filth. Wasn't your mother just a maid any man could climb on? The truth I had knelt and begged for in my last life, only to be denied, I finally heard from her lips today. So that was why Yun Fangfei often spat that my mother had been pressed beneath 1,000 men. That was why my stepmother always smirked and said she'd brought it on herself. That was why my father, though he never spoke of it, always had a flicker of guilt in his eyes, enough to spare me a path to live. They had all known my mother's wretched end from the start. Tears slipped down my cheeks, only making her more gleeful. She lifted her chin, propping a hand at her temple, as arrogant as when she and Yun Fangfei once joined hands to crush me. What are you, to dare vie with me? Your father even thought to bring her back as a concubine. When he swore his love to her, I was the brightest jewel in the capital, envied by all. How could I be dragged into the mud by her in an instant? My father only needed one trip south to set up a literary prison case and erase every trace. She was deluded enough to get dozens of people executed to the 9th degree. She deserved to die, deserved a fate worse than death. And you. I didn't let her finish. Fury boiling over, I drove my fists into her lower belly, one heavy blow after another. When her mouth opened in pain, I seized her jaw and rammed a pill between her teeth. Clamping my hand over her mouth, I held her fast until, panicked, she swallowed. Only then did I release her. She clawed at her throat, screaming accusations, but I paid her no mind. When her cheeks began to flush, I curved my lips coldly. I'm giving you exactly what you gave my mother. Surely you can endure it. And another thing, your fine husband never once mentioned a family in the capital. He deceived my mother, yet you wouldn't touch a hair on his head, preferring instead to murder a woman just like you, betrayed by a man. You're useless to the marrow. What my mother suffered, you will repay tenfold. Her pupils contracted, but before she could react, I chopped the back of her neck. Smiling faintly, I pushed the door open and stepped out. The 2 guards at her door had earlier received a box of pastries from me, now they were squirming and scratching at themselves with impatience. I smiled. Madam says you're to go in, she has orders for you. They exchanged a doubtful glance, but still, half trusting, pushed the door open. The moment they stepped inside, I slammed the door and locked it from the outside. They pounded and shouted, but I didn't hear them. All of this was thanks to a marquee household in chaos, and to my stepmother's disdain for me when I played the obedient, meek daughter, giving me all the openings I needed. Soon, the noise inside weakened, replaced by ragged breathing. Later, they would find my stepmother collapsed on the floor, her clothes in disarray, skirts pushed up, the marks left behind impossible to miss. When the sound of tearing silk rang out, I unlocked the door just enough to slip away without looking back. It was time to give her a disgrace she could never wash away, a life worse than death. As expected, Father was standing under the corridor. Seeing the red swelling on my cheek, he assumed I'd been to see my sister. She's been spoiled from birth, never suffered a grievance. You've had your revenge, let it go now. I raised you to that position, and I can pull you down from it. People must look forward to go far. You're clever, you understand the need to walk together. I hid the coldness in my eyes, lowered my head obediently. Yes, Father. Then I added lightly. Mother saw the pastries you sent and gave them all to her guards. She'll likely go to bed hungry tonight. As I expected, Father, pricked by guilt, dismissed me and personally wrapped up a pouch of her favorite pastries to take to the ancestral hall. Only, what awaited him there would be a tidal wave. Indeed. Before a stick of incense had burned, word spread that chaos had erupted in the ancestral hall. The two guards who'd long lorded it over others under her protection were dragged out on Father's orders and beaten to death with clubs. My stepmother, stricken by grief and rage, collapsed unconscious and was immediately sent to a villa outside the city to recover. I heard my stepmother had been beaten unconscious by Father himself, her face swollen beyond recognition, several teeth knocked out, even her thigh bone fractured with a kick. Men, they can betray anyone, but if someone uses the same method to betray them in turn, they cannot bear it for even a moment. Childhood sweethearts, vows of undying devotion, the dream of growing old together, in the end, none of it weighs as much as a man's pride and dignity. Years ago, when the woman he had sworn to love in Qingling came to our gates branded like a criminal, begging for help, he couldn't endure 30 strokes, and certainly wouldn't risk becoming a laughingstock among his peers. So he let my stepmother dump all the filth onto my mother's head. They said my mother had taken advantage of his drunkenness to seduce him and bear me. But in truth, under the moon and blossoms, it had been he who had begged her to give him a child. Now, with his wife and daughter in ruin and himself a middle-aged man suffering such a blow, even a steel-hearted marquis could not withstand it, his hair turned white overnight. When he recovered his composure, suspicion stirred. He summoned a trusted imperial physician that very night to investigate. But nothing was found. As expected of a treasure worth a king's ransom, the antidote I had hidden in the incense burner flushed the poison from her system within moments, leaving no trace. Even so, Father fell gravely ill and shut himself away, leaving grandmother to hand the household affairs over to me. I didn't hold back, I laced Yun Fengfei's medicine with another drug. It caused no lasting harm, only an itch deep into the bone, the kind that brought pain with it, impossible to endure. I listened to her groans, her curses, until at last she screamed. Wei Hang, I hate you. If you hadn't pushed me into the flames, how could I be like this? And right then, Wei Hang arrived at the estate. Just as I'd predicted, her virtue already gone, the Empress, to preserve his face, declared that the two had been in love from the start, but the strict household rules had forced them to sneak away to admire the moon in the secluded courtyard. No one truly believed such honeyed words, but Father's lack of outrage was as good as admission. When the imperial edict for their marriage arrived, Father accepted with a smile, and the gossip cooled somewhat. To play the devoted lover, the third prince, pining desperately for Yun Fengfei, rushed to visit her as soon as he recovered. But the hatred in him was already a surging tide. He remembered the Empress's instructions: no matter how monstrous she looked, he must endure, bring her into his residence, and, whatever he did to her behind closed doors, keep up the appearance of deep affection before others. Wearing a half-mask to cover his burns, Wei Hang forced a stiff smile, the effect grotesque and unsettling. But when his eyes met hers, she, tearing at her own bandages in agony from the itch, both let out a piercing, soul-shaking scream. Before I could speak, Wei Shen, without a shred of mercy, began his own retaliation. Old lovers reunited, what an emotional moment, I murmured. Why don't I let you two reminisce in peace? I'll close the door for you. Ignoring Wei Heng's horrified look, Wei Shen shut the door with a click. Ugly ghost meets ugly ghost, he said coldly. Let's see which one breaks first. Before a stick of incense had burned, Wei Heng burst out, kicking the door open, head bent as he vomited violently. She stinks. Ugly and rotten, how do you stand it? Oh, too itchy, she must have scratched herself raw until the flesh rotted. My oversight, I should have had the physician peel the dead skin sooner. After all, in my last life, she had called me filthy and ugly, refused to place me in a coffin, and ordered my body thrown to the wild dogs. A favor that great, of course I would return in full. Wei Shen cast me a sidelong glance, his tone dry. My dear brother once told me, after his trysts with her, there is no scent sweeter than a woman's body. Said I had no fortune to enjoy it. Looks like now, he can't enjoy it either. Wei Heng's jaw clenched, but already having provoked the Empress's fury, he dared not act rashly. He gave Wei Shen one last glare and stormed off. Wei Shen, always one to avoid direct confrontation, had, for the first time, faced his enemy head-on and walked away victorious. His lips curved, his mood greatly improved. His tone toward me was almost amiable. I have to admit, you make a fine ally. Behave yourself, and I won't be in a hurry to kill you. I nodded mildly. Right. Behave yourself, and you'll live longer too. The wedding day arrived in a blink. The bright red bridal sedan carried me through the main gates of the fourth prince's residence, while a small, quiet sedan bore my dear sister into the third prince's household. From that moment on, she would be caged in gilded bars, her life worse than death. And I, standing at the very top, imitated the same look of disdain she once wore, using her miserable state as the perfect garnish to my drunken amusements. Wei Shen and I were only ever predator and predator, walking alongside one another. He had no desire to touch me. I knew that well. So, in the nuptial wine on our wedding night, I slipped in a little something. The moment he drank it, his body went limp, collapsing onto the bed, limbs useless. Leaning close, I smiled. A bridal chamber night without touching your bride, what a disgrace. Honestly, husband, you're quite handsome. I've had my eye on you for a while now. So, why don't you start enjoying yourself? He hated me to the bone, but his body was traitorously honest. I had no experience, but I spared no effort, rolling him this way and that, trying every angle. After all, the drug had been prepared 3 months in advance. I had to make this shot count. The next morning, before I'd even finished yawning awake, Wei Shen's sword was at my throat. I peeked at him over the edge of a yawn. What? Feeling unwell. You should have said. Your hands and feet were weak, but your tongue wasn't numb, you kissed plenty well enough. His face darkened with shame and anger, cursing me as shameless. Dodging the sharp blade, I rolled to the side. Want to kill me and hand your weakness to the central palace. If you can't bear to kill me, then what's the point of this little display? I'm already your principal wife. If you won't use me, do you expect me to explode on my own? I let my gaze drift downward, my expression shameless beyond belief. In the end, I pushed him to fury. With a growl, he hurled the sword away and stayed clear of the main courtyard for a long time after. I, on the other hand, was delighted, quiet, comfortable, just waiting for my belly to make its claim and shift the balance. Once, I made a show of visiting my dear sister. She didn't thank me, she just covered her face with a thin sleeve, glaring at me in hatred. Have you come to mock me? Her hand beneath the sleeve shook, unable to hide the bruises blotching her neck. I already knew. She was chained by the throat, beaten and humiliated in turns by Wei Heng and Li Weiying, the one who had once been her dearest friend, treated like a dog or a cat in the household. I had once whispered to Li Weiing that it wasn't me who pushed her into the lake, but Yun Fengfei herself, desperate to hide her affair. An empty-headed thing like her had believed it instantly. After all, if I'd wanted her dead, why would I have pulled her out of the water? A very convincing logic. Now Wei Heng couldn't stand the sight of her, leaving Li Weiing to care for her, which meant returning every petty cruelty Yun Fengfei had once used on me, down to the last. It was bitter enough that she actually came begging, to me, the one she had despised most. You've laughed enough. We're both daughters of the Yun family, could you at least send a letter to the country estate, tell my mother? I miss her. I widened my eyes in mock surprise. You don't know. Your mother, the second day after she was sent away, had her nurse take her place under house arrest, while she slipped off to return to the capital to make my life hell. Unfortunately for her, my people were waiting along the road, and saw her to Yenmen Pass instead. On the very bed where my mother had been tormented to death, your lofty mother has lain for half a year. Every ounce of humiliation and pain my mother suffered, I've returned to her 100-fold. It was far easier when one had power, not like me back then, beaten bloody over a single cold bun. I didn't tell Yun Fengfei any of that. I only smiled lightly. How could father keep a filthy traitor who shamed his name? Sent to the estate. Who knows where she is now? You're too naive. He says you're his most beloved, yet here you are, sent to suffer. He loves only himself and the Marquisite's future. I hear grandmother has bought 2 women of good standing. Likely to give them to father, to bear sons and carry on the line. Yun Fengfei's face drained, her body swaying before she collapsed, trembling. I turned to leave, lips curved faintly, and let the hairpin at my temple fall to the ground by accident. Unlike my stepmother's, this one had been honed to a knife's edge and soaked in poison. One deadly strike would be as easy as turning my hand. This time, her life would be hers to decide. Consort Joey, harboring her own grudges against me, began sending women into Wei Shen's residence one after another. I had always been a magnanimous woman, not only did I not object, I welcomed them gladly. Not a trace of jealousy, only careful arrangements to see each woman dressed well, housed in comfort, lacking nothing. Wei Shen couldn't see through me, his brows knitting. What scheme are you playing now? I shook my head with a light smile. Husband and wife are one body. If the inner courtyard falls into chaos, it's your reputation that suffers. The imperial concubine cares only for His Majesty's love, never for your future. I'm different, I love you too much to stand idly by. They're just women. Why should I be jealous? But Wei Shen was exactly the kind of man I knew him to be, ruthless, selfish, and cold-hearted. To seek true love from him was even more foolish than Yun Fengfei's blind devotion. I only pretended to be lovesick, coaxing a man starved for affection. He scoffed. Wei Heng made a human skin mask. Wear it, and your face is as it was. My hand paused mid-pour. So what? Giving a dead man a beautiful face, will that make him live again? Wei Shen's frown deepened. You want me to kill him? I curled my lips and shook my head lightly. I already have someone else. He sneered. If you want to die, go alone. Don't drag me down. But not 2 weeks later, he had nothing to laugh about. In the dead of night, Yun Fengfei drove a hairpin straight into Wei Heng's heart, then strangled Li Weiing, the one who had once been locked with her in the dog cage, before fleeing home, covered in blood. Father saw her and needed no explanation. His voice shook. Fengfei, go to the palace and face your crime. At last, she believed what I'd told her that day. Father had only himself and the Marquisite's future in his eyes. She had never been there. She laughed wildly, tears spilling down her face. Father staggered forward, taking her hand, pleading, bargaining with the life of the entire household. But those words were the final blade that severed her last hope. He would rather send his daughter to die than smuggle her safely from the capital. He could not answer. And in that instant, Feng Fei's poisoned hairpin drove into the chest of the man she had once respected most. "Let's go find Mother," she said. "You can apologize to her with me. You destroyed everything, now you'll pay." Father could not believe it. The daughter he had loved most had killed him with her own hands. He had known full well my stepmother had ruined my mother, and yet had turned a blind eye. I had always seen him as the chief culprit. Why would I ever let him live in peace? With wife dead, daughter driven mad, his heart flayed alive, in the end he should pay with his life. And to die at the hands of the one he loved most, that was a fitting end. Knowing she could not escape, Feng Fei finally turned the poisoned hairpin on herself. Blood bloomed on her robes, and her soul left her body where she stood. The Empress flew into a rage. The entire Marquis household was thrown into the dungeons. Only I, as the fourth prince's principal wife and royal daughter-in-law, completely unaware of events, escaped punishment. Watching them hauled away in prison carts, I hide among the crowd, lips curling in a cold smile. In this life, the ones who had to die were still you, the wolves in human skin, the liars who twisted black and white. When the news reached him, Wei Shen was stunned, then elated, too much to speak for half a day. The emperor had 3 sons. With Wei Heng gone and only the 5th prince, a frail 3-year-old weakened since the empress's plot to drown him, there was no longer any real competition. What Wei Shen had never dared to dream now fell into his hands. While the central palace consort coughed blood and fainted from rage, I collapsed suddenly in the corridor. The imperial physician's verdict: I had been pregnant for 3 months. It was the first joyful news His Majesty had heard since the 3rd prince's face was destroyed. From then on, the 4th prince, once unfavored, became a frequent guest at the imperial study. And I, as a prince's principal wife, now stood on the threshold of a brilliant future. In the dark prison, my stepmother refused to believe it. Hair wild, body wasted to skin and bone, she screamed like a specter. "Wei Shen is ruthless and cruel, you'll die at his hands sooner or later." I smiled. "You think I'd be so kind as to lay the road and sew the wedding robes for someone else? It was me who made sure you wouldn't even get to die together." She didn't understand. I only smiled and said nothing. When I learned I was pregnant, I brought him a bowl of soup, a soup to end all future heirs. In my womb, there would be only 1 drop of his blood, the only child. If I was to die, it would be after he secured the crown prince's seat. Looking at the newly arrived concubines, I let my lips curve, speaking slowly. "I'm not like you. Women needn't trouble women. The women in this prince's household all owe me a favor, each one a blade in my hand. When he sits firmly in the Eastern Palace, that will be the moment his death draws near. What would I have to fear then? In this life, I want you to watch with wide open eyes as the despised daughter of a so-called whore turns fate on its head, standing at the very top, looking down on the world. A sparrow perching on a high branch, it was always to seize the Daeon's head. This life, I will fight, I will take, and I will win." The end.